Hi, this is Carsten from UFO Denmark. We are so lucky to have Ray Hernandez on our show today. Ray has an academic background and is the co-founder of Free. Ray, can you please introduce yourself?
Surely. My name is Ray Hernandez. I am one of the co-founders of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, which I will be speaking to you later. I'm also the founder of the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, which is also a 501c3 academic research institute comprised of more than 20 PhD academics and 5 medical doctors. And I'll be speaking about that project as well. As Carsten said earlier, I have an academic background. I went to Cornell University for a master's degree. I went to the University of California at Berkeley for a PhD. And then I was a professor for 6 years before I became an attorney. And for the last 20 years, I've been working as an attorney for the U.S. Department of Treasury, a tax attorney, basically. Before 2012, I had zero interest nor knowledge in anything that was UFO related, paranormal related, anything that was consciousness related. I didn't know what these things were. And then in 2012, my wife and I had a mutual experience in our living room where an energy being appeared, healed. This being healed our dog, who we were going to euthanize later that afternoon. My wife had 45 minutes of missing time. This energy being put me to sleep. And then when I woke up, my wife, who had disappeared right in front of my eyes, all of a sudden reappeared and looked down. The dog, who was totally paralyzed before, a 15-year-old dog, was now running around like a teenager. And then about a month and a half later, my wife went outside because the dog woke her up at about 3 in the morning. And she went outside, and all of a sudden she heard this deafening noise, a very loud noise. And she looked up, and there was a huge UFO right on top of her. It was like a Goodyear blimp, gigantic, and had she said it had stained glass windows all around it on the edges. And then she went to Mexico for a month, and she would be praying to call down her angels, because she always saw this as an angelic experience. And these huge UFOs would appear. Twice these experiences occurred with her family members present. So they all saw this huge UFO that my wife had called down. My wife also, while she was in Mexico, also saw these 3 7 to 8 foot tall human-looking beings with white monk's robes that floated right in front of her. They didn't walk; they floated right in front of her. And then afterwards, for the next year or so, she had various paranormal experiences. Now, in terms of my experience, after the first 6 months, after the initial encounter in our living room, I didn't have anything. And then in August of 2012, I called down the UFO that my wife had been interacting with. And 15 minutes later, this big, gigantic UFO, UAP, I prefer the term UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, appeared less than meters. I guess it would be the equivalent of maybe 15 meters from myself, and it was right on top of my next door neighbor's house. And it was huge. It was approximately 100 meters tall by about 600 meters in depth, going all the way back. And eventually my daughter, who was 10 years old, got to see it. And 3 friends of mine, adult witnesses, got to see it. There was telepathic communication that took place, other types of paranormal type of experiences that took place, which we don't have enough time to discuss. And it was after that initial experience that I began 2.5 years of almost nonstop paranormal experiences. And but I'm not here to speak about that. What I'm here about is to talk about the world's first comprehensive academic research study on UFO contact experiencers. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. We did publish last year, in May of last year, an 820-page book titled Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. And I can send you various chapters from our book for free. Just send me the request via my email. And this is the email, info@experiencer.org. And so we will send you various chapters, including one document is a peer-reviewed academic research paper that was published in the Journal of Scientific Exploration. And that's a journal that Jacques Vallee has published in, that Dr. Dean Radin and many of the PhDs that have been studying this phenomenon have published in the past. This was co-authored by myself and 3 PhD academics. I will also send that to you. So if you want to know more about it, this is the email that you send it to. So let me click on my presentation. The new organization that replaced the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation is titled Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, or CCRI. And I'll be speaking a little bit more about that later on. Okay, the CCRI organization is a 501c3 non-for-profit academic research institute. Our focus is on researching what is consciousness, what is the nature of our reality, by undertaking cross-comparative research on individuals that are having various types of contact experiences with non-human intelligence, okay, via what we're calling the contact modalities, which I will define later on. We're going to be publishing a new book in October of this year titled A Greater Reality, The New Paradigm of Consciousness, the Paranormal, and the Contact Modalities. And it's going to have 3 co-editors, myself, Dr. Rudy Shield, who is a emeritus professor of astrophysics, Dr. John Klimo, who's retired professor of psychology. Roughly half the articles are going to be written by PhD academics. The other half are going to be written by experiencers. And as you can see by the book cover, these are all the topics that we're going to be discussing in our book. Near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, UFOs, ghosts and spirits, remote viewing, psychedelic journeys, et cetera, et cetera. So let me continue. Consciousness and Contact Research Institute now has over 20 PhD academics, not 15. We also have 5 medical doctors. We have 10 lay researchers. And we're about to embark on a 5-year academic research study on the major experiencers of the contact modalities via quantitative and qualitative surveys and structured interviews. The members of the organization are as follows. Rudy Shield is an emeritus professor of astrophysics at Harvard University. Dr. Gary Schwartz is received his PhD from Harvard University and was a tenured professor of psychology at Yale University. And over the last 20 years, he's been a faculty member at the University of Arizona. He's been studying mediumship. Dr. Jeffrey Long, a medical doctor, is one of the world's leading researchers on near-death experiences. He's published 3 books on this topic, and he also has the world's largest statistical database on near-death experiencers. Over 14,000 individuals have taken his surveys. Dr. Bob Davis is a retired professor of neuroscience, received his PhD from Ohio State, and was a professor for over 35 years at the State University of New York. Dr. Claude Swanson received his PhD in physics from Princeton University. Dr. John Klimo, who I'm going to be talking later on, was a PhD professor from Brown University and was a professor for over 45 years in psychology. Stephen A. Schwartz was one of the pioneers, one of the inventors of remote viewing, and one of the world's leading experts on non-local consciousness. Dean Radin is the lead scientist at the Institute for Noetic Sciences, which is the world's leading authority on the psi phenomenon and parapsychology. Dr. Jeffrey Mishloff has a PhD in parapsychology from the University of California, Berkeley, where I went to school. And Dr. Glenn Ryan has a PhD in biochemistry from the University of London. Russell Scalpone, PhD in psychology. And he has over 40 years of statistical research study. And he's very much interested in all of these topics. Dr. Michael Grosso, a PhD in philosophy from Columbia University, and he's now affiliated with the University of Virginia. Dr. John Alexander wrote his PhD on near-death experiences. He's been the president of the International Remote Viewing Association and also the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And he wrote a book several years ago about UFOs. Dr. Raul Valverde is a professor of information systems at Concordia University in Canada. And Dr. Sean Esborn Hargens, PhD in philosophy, is a professor of integral research at the John F. Kennedy University. Now, these are our medical doctors, Dr. Joseph Burks, Dr. Melinda Greer, Dr. Akila Wazakira. Joseph was the head of emergency medicine at the largest hospital in Los Angeles for over 35 years. Dr. Melinda Greer is currently a medical doctor in the United States. And she's also a major experiencer. And Dr. Akila Wirasekira is a postdoctoral research fellow in neuroscience at the Harvard Medical School. Paul Eno is one of the world's leading authorities on ghosts, spirits, poltergeists, etc. So these are just some of the names of the people in our organization, the CCRI. Now, the CCRI, we hypothesize that we are interacting with non-human intelligence via various paranormal modalities, and that all of these contact modalities might be derived from one source and might be one phenomenon. CCRI, this is all the members that I previously mentioned to you, we hypothesize that consciousness is what unifies the contact modalities, and that consciousness is primary and not our material reality. The majority of mainstream ufology researchers view the UFO phenomenon mainly from a nuts and bolts materialist perspective. The CCRI academics, medical doctors, and researchers do not. All of us are of the opinion that this materialist nuts and bolts approach to ufology has contributed very little to the understanding of what the UFO phenomenon is all about. Every year we repeat discussions about Roswell, Rendlesham Forest. A new video comes out, a new picture come out. That type of approach has given us very little over the last 80 years to be able to understand this phenomenon. Materialism. Most of the nuts and bolts mainstream ufologists still adhere to this. Materialism, the idea that matter is the only reality, and the belief system that the mind is nothing but the physical activity of the brain, and that our thoughts cannot have any effect upon our brains and bodies, our actions, and the physical world. Now, in contrast, research on quantum physics, the psi phenomenon, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, mediumship, hallucinogens, and now the research data from the free experiencer research study supports the hypothesis that the mind can exist separate from the brain, and that consciousness is the key to be able to understand all of the contact modalities. The 5-year academic research study. We undertook a 5-year academic research study under the Free Foundation to be able to, for the first time, to understand the UFO contact experiencers. Before our study, no one had any data, academically derived data, on the UFO contact phenomena. We knew almost nothing about this. All you had literally were thousands of people writing books about their experiences, and individuals lecturing about their own personal experiences. The so-called research in the fields, this field of ufology that were invited to speak at conferences, were people like David Jacobs and Bob Hopkins, and at most they worked with 200 people, and they got all their data via hypnotic regressions. okay? Now, this is not scientific data, okay? No one has done this before. So what we're, and I'm gonna be talking about that data in a couple of minutes, the research data. Now, in terms of what CCRI wants to do, now that we have that data on UFO contact experiences, we then want to be able to compare that data that we collected over a 5-year period, and we want to be able to compare it with the data from near-death experiences, from out-of-body experiences, from the data people have been researching, ghosts and spirits, mediumship, etc. But we're going to be able to do that by identifying the major experiencers of people that had experiences through the contact modalities. Now, these are the contact modalities. Unidentified aerial phenomenon / UFO. My preferred term is UAP. Contact experiencers, near-death experiencers, out-of-body experiences, ghosts and spirit communications, and people that have encountered perceived ghosts and spirits, remote viewing contact with non-human intelligence, shamanic psychedelic contact via DMT, psilocybin, etc., mediumship and channeling, and other types of human communication with non-human intelligence and its related paranormal experiences. Now, again, all of the members of our organization, we hypothesize that all of these experiences are derived from one phenomenon. All of them involve a manipulation of space-time. And I'm going to be talking about that a little bit later on. So there are numerous commonalities between all of these experiences. One is that it involves the manipulation of space-time, and another is that all of these experiences, the hypothesis among our PhD academics is that these experiences involve multi-dimensional experiences, which by definition involve a manipulation of space-time. This is just a graphic depiction of some of the contact modalities, not all of them, that they're all interrelated, and that consciousness is the glue that holds it together. Now let me play George Knapp. George Knapp is one of the radio show hosts of a very popular show called Coast to Coast. Some of you might have listened to this radio show over many, many years. He's been a host of Coast to Coast, I believe, for more than 30 years. And he's seen it all, heard it all. He's interviewed thousands of researchers, academics, medical doctors, experiencers, you name it, mainly on the topic of UFO, but also the paranormal. And let me play an audio of a recording of an interview that I did with George Knapp.
Eventually, Bob Bigelow created his own organization called NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science. So for a reporter like me who's interested in UFOs and related subjects, it was manna from heaven. It was great to have this really top-notch, world-class group of scientists studying these mysteries, and it's right here in my backyard. So I spent a lot of time getting to know those guys. I was a fly on the wall for a lot of their meetings. And it became obvious early on that the mystery that I was pursuing, the UFO cover-up, the paper trail about flying saucers, was so much bigger that was one tiny aspect of a much bigger mystery. I got to meet Jacques Vallee in those days. He was part of the NIDS board and the NIDS team, and he explained to me, he said, look, if the ultimate end, the solution to the UFO mystery is that people are coming here from other planets and visiting us, I'm going to be really disappointed, because to him, the evidence indicated it's something much bigger than that. The cases that he had studied, the specific data of UFO craft and how they operated indicated to him that whatever they are, that they can manipulate space-time, they can bend it to their will. And if they can bend space-time, that in fact they could be aliens from other planets, they could be time travelers, interdimensionals, all of the above. So he suspected that the ultimate answers are much bigger than just visitors from other planets, and I tend to agree with him. When the NIDS board got up and running, these world-class scientists from different disciplines, Dr. Edgar Mitchell was one of them. He wasn't the only astronaut, by the way, on that board. They opened my eyes to a much bigger world and a much bigger world of possibilities, that aliens may not be from other planets, that flying saucers may not actually be craft from other worlds, that it might represent something else. the lesson, and there aren't many that you can get from Skinwalker Ranch, the lesson is that somehow all of these phenomena are related, that it's as if it was trying to tell us something. It's a learning curve. Hey, all these are related. Now it's up to you to figure out how. Flying saucers is not going to be the answer to these bigger questions, that you need to have a much broader understanding of the nature of reality itself. The universe is telling us something here. It's telling us that the reality isn't what it used to be, that reality is far more mysterious and complex and mind-boggling than maybe we can imagine. And you wonder whether this is a simulation, whether it's a script, am I starring in my own movie? What the heck is going on? And you have those kind of thoughts, and then a paper comes out that it says, we believe that we can demonstrate that objective reality does not exist, that it is observer generated, that consciousness exists before the physical universe. The tree does not fall in the forest if there's nobody there to hear it. It's tough to get your head around that stuff. It changes everything. And when you start thinking of it in those terms, it makes UFOs look, and Roswell and crashes look very small.
So as a summary, George Knapp, who's one of the world's leading authorities on UFOs, he's been involved since, I believe, the late 70s on this topic of UFOs. He's interviewed, you name it, he's interviewed everybody numerous times. He says that the lessons of all of these paranormal phenomenon, which we are calling the contact modalities, he says they're all interrelated. He says that flying saucers might not be crafts from other worlds. These visitors might not be from another planet. He says flying saucers, which is the materialist nuts and bolts approach to ufology, is not the answer to these bigger questions. He says you need to have a much more broader understanding of the nature of our reality. That reality is far more complex than we can imagine. He says it makes UFOs, Roswell, and Rendlesham Forest and other types of crashes, he says it makes it look very small. So in other words, we need to move away from materialist ufology into the bigger picture. And that's what our organization is studying. Dr. John Alexander, as I said before, he's a man of many visions. He was the president many years for the International Remote Viewers Association. He wrote his PhD on near-death experiences. He was the second president of the International Association of Near-Death Studies, and he has frequently lectured on the topic of UFOs, and actually wrote a major book about 3 years ago on UFOs. And so this is what Dr. Alexander stated.
Understand it. You now believe that if we're going to understand the UFO phenomenon, we have to look at it in this wider context, including interspecies communication, shamanism, higher states of consciousness, and so on.
Right. Remote viewing. I did a lot of work with near-death studies. Mm-hmm. I was once the president of the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And it is my premise that somehow all of these phenomena are connected. One of the problems in looking at it is we tend to stovepipe. And I think in doing that, you cut off a lot of the information that would be helpful in understanding a theoretical basis, which does not exist at this point.
By using the term stovepipe, I think you mean trying to see it as a single discipline rather
Correct.
than an interdisciplinary approach.
Very, very much so. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you look at near-death experience, poltergeist, remote viewing, UFOs, and they cut off access of the information in between. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a mistake.
So, Dr. John Alexander, to understand the UFO phenomenon, we need to look at it via a wider context of the contact modalities. UFOs, NDEs, out-of-body experiences, remote viewing, shamanism, poltergeist, spirits, etc., and not as each of these phenomena as separate phenomena. He says they're not separate. He says they're all interrelated. One of the problems, he says, is that we tend to stovepipe each phenomenon as a single discipline instead of viewing it via an interdisciplinary approach. Okay. He says somehow all of these phenomena are connected. They're interrelated. Now, Dr. Dean Radin, as an introduction, Dr. Dean Radin is the lead scientist at the Institute for Noetic Sciences, which is the institute that Dr. Edgar Mitchell founded in 1972. And over the many years, that organization, IONS, is now considered the world's leading authority on parapsychology, the psi phenomenon, and on consciousness research, non-local consciousness research. And also Dr. Dean Radin has been involved for many years with Dr. Jacques Vallee regarding the paranormal and UFO research. So here's Dr. Dean Radin.
I knew that Edgar was very interested in pursuing the UFO ET contact idea because he had become convinced through his own experience and through his contacts with other people that there was something there, there's something worth studying. So his part of his genius and his passion was to use the best tools that we have, the tools of science, to understand the full range of experiences. So IONS has generally not been focused on the UFO thing. It's partially because we can't study everything. We want to focus on a few things that we can study well with the tools that we have and also the funding that we have. And we're doing quite well at that. But we can't study everything. So we're leaving the idea of non-human intelligence contact only looking at it at this point in terms of mediumship and channeling, which is a strong overlap then, because a lot of the experiences in a different context, which might be thought of as an ET extraterrestrial something, could be thought of as, and in fact probably is, very close to what channelers talk about. They're always talking about space people. So we don't know what that is, but it comes up again and again. And somewhat, not quite as much, but mediumship studies where we're looking at psychics who are very good at seeing something. They're communicating with something that others can't see, and we know that they get verified information. We can check that the information is correct. So in the case of looking at the larger body of a very wide range of experiences, this is where Edgar was very interested, and FREE has basically taken up the mantle for that part. So in a sense, we're like sister organizations. We're taking, as best as we can, laboratory approaches. You're a little bit ahead of us in that sense, and finding out, well, what's happening in the population at large.
Okay, a summary of Dr. Dean Radin's statements. He said that IONS was founded by Dr. Edgar Mitchell to scientifically research the relationship between the psi phenomenon, ESP, etc., and consciousness. Dr. Dean Radin is the lead scientist at IONS. And he said that he knew Edgar, this is Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was one of the co-founders of FREE. He knew that Edgar was interested in the relationship between UFOs, UAPs, non-human intelligence, and consciousness. He said that IONS is also researching non-human intelligence, but their focus is solely on studying mediumship and channeling. He says IONS and FREE are like sister organizations, but he said you, which is the FREE organization, are a little bit ahead of us in studying the relationship between consciousness and contact with non-human intelligence. So here you have the major organization in the world that's studying the psi phenomenon, paranormal phenomenon, and also consciousness, saying that our organization is ahead of them in studying this whole aspect of contact with non-human intelligence. Okay, for our research study, how can we compare the UAP-related contact experiencers to NDEs, OBEs, and other experiencers of the contact modalities when there was no comprehensive statistical data on the UAP contact experiencers? And I did what is called an academic literature review to see what has been written academically about my personal experiences about what happened to me. And other UFO contact experiences. And what I quickly realized was that there was almost nothing. There were a few minor studies that had like 50 people, they asked like 50 questions, but we really had almost zero academically derived statistical data. Thus, there was a need for a formal, comprehensive, multinational, multi-language academic research study on the UAP contact experiencers. And once we had that data, then we could begin to compare that to NDEs, OBEs. And there's many, many, many books and academic articles that have been written about NDEs, OBEs, and other experiences of the contact modalities. But for the UFOs, very little, almost nothing. Certainly no major comprehensive academic statistical research. Okay, there to the right, you'll see the book that we published last year. It's 820 pages. Okay, we have 15 chapters. It took 5 years to develop the data from that academic research study. And as I said before, it's the world's first comprehensive multi-language statistical academic research study on UAP-related contact experiencers. And the title of our book, which is available on Amazon, is titled Beyond UFOs, the Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. The following data that I'm going to be presenting now is based solely from our academic research study. To qualify to take our survey, you needed to have had two things. One is you needed to have seen a UFO, and secondly, you need to have had some type of contact experience with a non-human intelligence. The four co-founders of FREE, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14 astronaut, the founder of the Institute for Noetic Sciences, the major astronaut that has been, before his untimely death in 2016, since the mid-70s, spoke out publicly that UFOs exist and that we need to research this phenomenon. Dr. Edgar Mitchell was a brilliant man. He became a very close friend. I was at his home more than 20 different times. He only lived 90 minutes away. And I was at the hospital only a few days before he passed away. So Edgar was one of the co-founders. The other co-founders is Dr. Rudy Shield, who is an emeritus professor of astrophysics at Harvard University. And he was a very close friend of the late Dr. John Mack, who was one of the pioneers that worked with major UFO contact experiencers. The third major co-founder is Mary Rodwell, and I believe she spoke personally to your organization in Denmark several years ago. And Mary needs very little introduction. She's one of the lead individuals that have been researching UFO contact experiencers for over 30 years. And then I'm the fourth co-founder, and I already previously introduced myself. And this is a picture of me speaking at the Ozark Mountain UFO Conference. Dr. John Klimo is a retired professor of psychology for over 45 years, and he taught research methodology all those years at numerous universities, and he became the co-chair of the Free Experiencer Research Study. So again, this is not a little Mickey Mouse study that someone from down the street developed, okay? This is all retired academic professors together with researchers in the field developed this. This is Dr. Rudy Shield, and next to Kathleen Martin, you can't see the video, but I'll play the audio, but basically Kathleen was also one of the initial members of our research committee. And many of you know Kathleen Martin. She's one of the lead authorities on UFO contact experiencers, and she wrote, I believe it was 3 books with Stanton Friedman, one of the pioneers of UFO research. So again, these are very highly legitimate and credible people. So this is Dr. Rudy Shield speaking.
Today, we confront one of the most exciting developments in the history of our civilization, the understanding of our participation in a universe teeming with life. We need an academic study to scientifically investigate the nature of our involvement in a greater universe of living beings. I'm Dr. Rudy Shield, the Executive Director of the Foundation for Research in the Extraterrestrial Experience, an international study program intended to research the program of extraterrestrial visitations. We ask for your support for our scientific study, both with financial contribution and with participation.
Now, Rudy was the executive director of the Free Foundation. So here you have a retired professor of astrophysics from Harvard leading the organization. So again, this is not a Mickey Mouse organization, okay? This is real hardcore scientists and academics working with leading researchers in the field. Now, our research methodology, we had two surveys. The first two quantitative surveys totaling 600 questions. Survey number 3 was 70 open-ended questions. That was the qualitative instrument. And for 3 years, we published our surveys on YouTube, weekly postings to over 500 Facebook sites. Most of them were UFO Facebook sites. Monthly mailings to over 8,000 email addresses, internet postings, and over 200 radio shows, radio interviews by all of the members of our research organization. Now, for our research, we only allowed information that was derived via conscious explicit memory. We did not allow memory from hypnotic regressions, from lucid dreams, or channeling. Their information from hypnotic regressions are very problematic. I'm not going to get into that discussion now. Lucid dreams, you don't know what is a real dream, what is a lucid dream, and channeling, there's 5,000 people out there doing channeling. We really don't know the validation of a specific channeler. So we only allowed conscious explicit memory. The languages we did our surveys in English, Spanish, French, German, and Slovak. And we're working on a Chinese survey as well. But what you're going to be hearing now in my presentation is only the data from our English language survey. Okay. The total as of June the 1st, 2018, was 4,145 people that took our phase 1 survey. The phase 2 survey, which is much, much more complex, had over 400 questions in the phase 2 survey. 450 questions, I'm sorry. That was 2,292 people. And then the phase 3 survey, which was the written responses to 70 open-ended questions, we had almost 1,500 people to answer that. Now, for phase 3, we received more than 10,000 pages of written responses to all 3 surveys. So naturally, this involved a lot of time to be able to first develop the surveys, and we spent 9 months developing the third surveys. We spent approximately 3.5 years collecting the data, and then we spent 9 months analyzing the data. And these individuals, before I get to that, let me go back just to say that we received these responses from individuals from over 100 countries, okay? Almost 4,300 responses from individuals from over 100 countries, okay? So this is a lot of data. So there were 4 major findings. There were many, many other findings, but if you were to say, Ray, what are the 4 major ones? Here they are. These experiences were overwhelmingly positive, okay? Number 2, the individual, the experiencers, resulted in a total and complete transformation for the positive, okay? People were totally transformed. They started off as caterpillars and they wound up as butterflies, okay? And I'll give you all the data for all of this. Number 3, these individuals were primarily not physical experiences. They might have seen a UFO, they might have seen a physical being, but the overwhelming majority of their experiences can be considered paranormal experiences. So our conclusion is that the UFO contact phenomenon involves primarily paranormal experiences with the physical aspects as a very small component. Number 4, these experiences, the UFO contact experiences, involve a manipulation of space-time. And that in turn leads to the hypothesis that these experiences might be interdimensional. Now, on that last topic, let me just say that, that we have 2 PhD physicists, Dr. Rudy Shield from Harvard and Dr. Claude Swanson, who got his PhD from Princeton University. These are not little tiny community colleges. These are 2 of the major physics PhD programs in the world, okay? And both of them told me that if today you get a PhD in theoretical physics, where your focus is theoretical physics, you would be an adherent to a multiverse theory. That means after you get a PhD, you will be accepting a theory that we don't live in one reality, that we live in a multiverse, okay? That we live in more than one reality, a multidimensional theory. So again, these are people like Albert Einstein, like Stephen Hawking, okay? Michio Kaku, these type of level individuals that know that based upon modern physics, we don't live in one reality, that we live in interdimensional reality, multidimensional reality. And so these experiences we're arguing involve a manipulation of space-time, and that these experiences might be interdimensional. And I will have data for each of these to back it up. Now, we wanted to find out this question: were these experiences positive, negative, or neutral? Because when I had my first experiences, and my wife, I had no idea what these things were, so I went to the internet. And the internet is like filled with 99.9% BS, okay? I won't say the word, but you know what I'm talking about. It's misinformation, disinformation, and the so-called UFO experts that are speaking about this phenomenon, these people are not experts at all, the vast majority of them, on the UFO contact experiencer. And also there was no data, okay? So we asked that question, whether their experiences were positive, negative, neutral, in 40 different ways, because depending on how you ask a question, you'll get a different response. So we asked it in numerous ways, and the following are just a few of these 40 questions. How would you describe your experiences? Was it positive, negative, or neutral? Okay. Well, we found out 66% said it was positive. Neutral was 29%. Negative was 5%. Now, again, in order to take the survey, you have to have seen a UFO and you have to have had some type of contact with non-human intelligence, okay? Not necessarily the same day, that same time, but throughout your life. Now, we even ask questions of specific types of beings. We ask questions for 12 different types of beings, okay? The most common that are talked about in the UFO contact phenomenon, okay? And here are just, seven out of the 12, okay? Now, the number one type of being that people were seeing were the energy beings, okay? But rarely does a UFO conference talk about energy beings. All they talk about is the short grays, the short grays, the short grays. Okay. Well, anyway, energy being 55%, human-looking beings at 52%, the short grays, which are they're 3 to 4 feet tall, 51%, ghosts or spirits, 47%, the tall grays, which are 5 to 9 feet tall, 33%, the reptilians, 25%, and the insectoid, the mantid beings, at 21%. And as you can see towards the right, if you look at the red numbers, that's the people that stated that it was negative. Okay. Let's look at the short grays, okay? If you just go to all these UFO conferences, and if you listen to all these so-called lecturers that are speaking about this topic, you would have no idea that only 11% of these people viewed their experiences with the short grays as negative. But that was it. It's 11%, okay? The vast majority, 59%, stated that it was neutral. Now, we're not talking about 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people here. We're talking about 1,173 people that had experiences with the short grays. Okay, this is for over 100 countries. And then also, let's look at the type of being that had the most negative responses. The reptilians, that was 23%. Okay, 60% that their experiences were actually negative. What we did in the phase 3 survey, which is the written responses, we looked at the people that had reptilian experiences. And we read, why did they answer negative, okay? Out of the 644 people, 644, we're not talking about 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people, okay? 644 people from over 100 countries that said that they had experiences with reptilians, okay? The vast majority, except for 2 or 3 people, said that the reptilian did not do anything bad to them. No. What happened was that most of the experiences were up close. The reptilian was within several feet, within a meter of them, okay? And they were just scared, absolutely frightened of the physicality of the being. The reptilians are usually described as being 7 to 8 feet tall, the body of Arnold Schwarzenegger, a bodybuilder, with the body of a crocodile, the head of an alligator, the little slanty eyes like cat eyes, appearing, 1 or 2 meters from you. And most of these people became totally frightened from that. And that's why 23% said that it was negative. Okay, but vast majority of people later on had additional encounters with the reptilians later on. And then many of these encounters involved telepathic communication, where it wasn't frightening anymore, and that was 17% said that it was positive. But for the vast majority of these reptilian experiences, like many of the other categories, it involved them appearing and then very quickly disappearing in front of you. Okay. So let's go to the next chart. So this gives you a lot of information of positive, negative, and neutral. We asked them to say, was it positive, negative, or neutral? We also asked questions, if you could stop your ET contact experiences, would you? Okay. We also defined ET via non-human intelligence, because when people also think of ET, they think of a little gray. Okay. But as you can see by the previous chart, people were seeing so many different types of diverse entities besides the short grays. So that's why we use the term ET and non-human intelligence. So if you could stop your ET contact experiences, would you? Well, 84% said no. Keep it coming, keep it coming. Don't make it stop. So if these experiences were so negative, so bad, why did 84% say no, keep it coming? Do you believe that ETs are bad, malevolent, evil? 91% no, they're not bad. They're not malevolent. Also, one of the major findings was the transformation of the contact experiencers, of the UFO contact experiencers. Now, let me go into the specifics of that. Back in 1986, Dr. Kenneth Ring, who was a tenured professor of psychology at the University of Connecticut, he was one of the top 2 or 3 leading near-death experiencers, researchers in the world, okay? He's published maybe 4 or 5 books on near-death experiences and over 20 academic peer-reviewed articles on near-death experiences. Back in 1986, he did a comparison of 85 people that were UFO abductees with 85 people that had NDE experiences. And this was a statistical study. It wasn't interviews. It was just they were supposed to fill out data on forms, just like the free research study. And so he asked over 400 questions. Now, 70 of those questions were, how did these people change? How were you before and how were you afterwards? To specific questions, okay? And what his data showed that both groups, both the UFO abductees and the NDE experiencers, changed in the same exact way. Depending on the question, between 75 to 85% were positively transformed or changed for that specific question. So we borrowed his 70 questions. And let me show you just a couple of these, maybe 10 of these questions, just to give you an idea. Okay. We asked that question, how did ET contact change your life? Okay. 51% said it was highly positive effect in changing their life. 22% said it was slightly positive effect in changing their life. So we have 73% said it was positive, that ET contact was actually positive. 17% said it was neutral. 6% said it was slightly negative, and 4% said it was highly negative. So you can see the overwhelming majority said it positively changed their life. Okay, now as I said before, between 73 to 85% said that they underwent a profound psychological profile change for the positive. As my daughter gave me a little snack. Thank you, sweetheart. And the following are just a few of these examples. Okay. Now, on your left, you will see the question, okay? The question starts, since I first became interested in my UFO experience. And so the question is, for example, my desire to help others. So in yellow, you will see strongly increased and increased somewhat. So as you can see, that's a total of 75%. So my desire to help others, 75% of these people, their desire to help other people, other fellow human beings, increased. Strongly decreased was less than 1%. Decreased somewhat was like 1%, okay? And had not changed was 23%. So let me go over these questions. Let me go over what strongly increased and increased somewhat. What increased? Since I first became interested in my UFO experience, my compassion for others has increased. My appreciation of the ordinary things of life. My sensitivity to the suffering of others. My concern with spiritual matters. Look at that, 83%. My desire to achieve a higher consciousness. My appreciation of nature. My spiritual feelings. My concern with the welfare of planet Earth. My understanding of what life is all about. My personal sense of purpose in life. My concern with ecological matters. Okay? Now let's take a look at what decreased. Okay? What decreased? My concern with material things. All of a sudden, it's not important every year to have a brand new Mercedes. Okay? Now you're going to drive a 2002 Honda Accord like I drive. Okay? Material things are not important anymore. My interest in organized religion. Okay? Like my wife. Okay? Every week she had to be at church. Okay? Every Thursday she had to be in group prayer meetings at church. Now she goes to her Catholic church maybe once every 3 to 4 months. Okay? She still communicates with God. Okay? And with these spirits, which she considers her angels. But in organized religion, decreased. And our data shows that 73% said that their interest in organized religion decreased. My competitive tendencies, all of a sudden, competition is not important anymore. For you to destroy a colleague at work so you could get the promotion, no, that's not important. My fear of death, okay, all of a sudden, these people don't fear death anymore, okay? My desire to become well-known, to become famous, again, decreased. So all of these questions lead the suggestions that these are the type of person that you would want to be your spouse, that you would want your children to be, that you would want your best friends to be, okay? This is how humanity would be. If you had these types of individuals, there would be a significant decrease in war, poverty, okay? Much more concern for humanity. You wouldn't see the humanic, barbaristic tendencies that we have. But yet, if you listen to the field of ufology, okay, mainstream materialist ufology, you go to these UFO conferences, okay, you go to the internet, you'll see the total opposite. You'll be reading these bogus investigators saying that these ETs want to conquer the world. And where did you get that information? Well, I hypnotically regressed 200 people in my living room, asking them leading questions. That's what people are listening to for over the last 35 years. Well, for the first time, we have real data from 4,250 people from over 100 countries that are telling you something completely opposite. Okay, another major primary findings is that these experiences are primarily paranormal and not physical contact experiences, okay, with non-human intelligence. Now, we asked the question, have you ever had an out-of-body experience? All the questions are to the left. Yes or no is on the right-hand side, okay? So out-of-body experiences, 80% of these people have had out-of-body experiences. Huge numbers, okay? And near-death experiences, 37%. A medical healing, like we had with our dog, that this energy being came and made my wife disappeared, and our dog, 45 minutes later, when my wife reappeared and they woke me up, all of a sudden the dog is running around, okay? Chapter 6 of our book, Beyond UFOs, which was jointly written by Dr. Joseph Burks, who's a retired medical doctor, and Preston Dennett, who wrote a book more than 20 years ago titled UFO Healings, 200 cases. And he recently updated with information from our research study. Now it's 300 medical healing case studies. So each page is a case study of a separate individual. And so they both jointly wrote chapter 6, which is on medical healings. We had 50% of the people, half the people said, have you ever had a medical healing? You or a family member by non-human intelligence. Well, 50% said yes. Did you experience involve some type of telepathic communication or a thought transference, a direct knowing being given to you by an ET, non-human intelligence? Almost 80%, 8 out of 10 people said yes, they've had telepathic communications. Have you ever had contact with non-human intelligence in a matrix reality? 50%. I had that, okay? Whatever this intelligence is that was interacting with me, while I was driving my car at 8:30 in the morning, going to work in the middle of a traffic jam, they took me out of my body and they brought me into another multi-dimensional reality, which I call a matrix reality. And there they began to teach me things. And they showed me the contact modalities and how it interacts with consciousness. That experience lasted almost 30 minutes. But yet when I was brought back to my body, there was no time that had spent. I was still listening to the same interview by this man on the radio show, and he did not even skip a second in the interview. It was like taken outside of space-time. And again, I'm not the only one. Here, there's 50% of these people. 50%, okay? Have you ever had a past life memory? 66%. Have you ever seen what can be described as a ghost or a spirit? 76%. Do you have memories of visiting heaven, or what can be called the spirit world? 46%. Have you seen small colored orbs, less than a foot, which is like a third of a meter? Okay, 67%. 2 out of 3 people have seen small colored orbs. And the way we asked that question, we asked it live, not in a picture or a video, but have you physically seen a small colored orb? Have objects, material objects, mysteriously appeared right in front of you? Those are called apports. Okay, 25% of the people. Have material objects ever fallen or suddenly moved around you or another member of your family without any reasonable explanation? 61%. The vast majority were things in the house that just flew right across them. 61%. Can you see or feel energy or auras around people? 74%. Okay, so 76% have seen a ghost or a spirit. 67% have had a past life memory. 49% have had their body out in space, like they're leaving planet Earth. 47% have met and conversed with a deceased person. Okay, 47% have conversed with Aunt Mary, who died 2 weeks ago. Okay, so huge numbers. 45% have memories of visiting what is commonly called the spirit world. 29% have channeled a non-human intelligence. Shadow people, that happened one time to me. All of a sudden, this dark streak of a human-looking person flashed, right in front of me. That was seen by 2 people on a Skype call, and both of them were shocked and alarmed. And one woman yelled out loud, and that's commonly called the shadow person. Okay, so 47%. Orbs. We asked numerous questions about orbs. 60% of these were seen in the house. 46% of the orb went through an object, such as a wall. 82% believe that these orbs are conscious living beings. Now, the information received. Kathleen Martin, who many of you know, she wrote a chapter in her book on the information received by non-human intelligence. She wrote that chapter based upon our data, okay? And so again, if anyone is interested in that, go check out the book Beyond UFOs. So we asked this generic question: did you receive any type of communication from an ET? Okay, 80% said yes. Was this communication in your native language? 75% said yes. Did this communication impart reassuring messages to you? 61%. Did they provide you with a spiritual message? 54% said yes. Did they give you a message of love or oneness? 54%. Did they express to you concern about humanity's behavior? 45%. Do you believe that you possess information about advanced technology, physics, or other scientific information that you've never read about or learned about in your normal environment? 42% yes. Did they give you information that they want you to share with others? 41%. Did they give you an environmental message regarding planet Earth? 39%. And this is interesting. Did they ever give you information about a future natural catastrophe or a depopulation of humanity? 32%. Okay. My wife was given that information. She predicted what's happening now. Okay. That was in 2013. Okay. And she was very, very detailed. Did they give you information about God or a creator? 31%. Did they give you information about parallel universes? 31%. So let me skip over some of these other things just to move these things along. Now, the physical experiences as well as abductions, okay? Have you had any ET contact but have no conscious recollection of ever being abducted, which is defined as being taken against your will? Well, 2/3 of the people said, yes, I've had ET contact, I have seen UFOs, but I've never been abducted. But yet when people refer to ET contact, many of these so-called researchers in the field, they always refer to this as the abduction phenomena, okay? They equivocate all contact with abductions, okay? And what our research study has demonstrated, and I'm going to continue with some more data about this, is that all of these people are missing 2/3 of the people. People have never been abducted, like in my case, okay? I've never been abducted, okay? Let me go on. And this is the reciprocal, okay? That we asked that question, have you ever had ET contact, but you also consciously remember that you were also abducted, okay? Which is defined as being taken against your will to another location. Where 34% said, yes, I've been abducted. Now let's take a look at the abduction. We asked the question, if you ever had an abduction, okay? How would you characterize your first few and your last few contact experiences with non-human intelligence, okay? So we wanted to find out what was their initial experience like? What did they perceive it to be like? And then now many, many years later, how would you answer that same question? So we had 5 different choices, okay? Choice number 1, it's a case of being a conscious contactee, an egalitarian, an equal relationship. 35% of the people said that's what it was. You are not an abductee, but you are a contactee, where you're being treated with respect and understanding. 35%, okay? It was still a case of an abduction, but we're seeking permission. They sought my permission to take me. And I was treated in a humane, compassionate way. But it was an abduction, okay? But they asked my permission and they treated me in a humane way. 8.7%. It was a case of abduction, but of a milder kind, a slightly more caring kind. 13%. Now we get into the most negative category. It was a case of abduction of the most negative kind. 8%. So if you could see by this data, the people that said it was like what people normally think of an abduction of the most negative kind, that's only 8%. That's it, 8%, folks. These are thousands of people that have had an abduction. Okay. Approximately how many times have you seen or interacted with these non-human intelligence entities? Okay. As you can see by this pie chart, more than 20 times is 40% of the people. So the vast majority of people are interacting with these beings numerous times. Okay. Between 11 and 20% was 6.2%. Now, only one time, 14%. Between 2 to 4 times, 22.1%. Now, it's this in category of one time, okay? That's where you get the most negative response. The people that had an abduction and that they've woken up and they were on a table, paralyzed, having a physical inspection, but usually by these short grays, and they've only had that one experience, and that's their only recollection. Those are the people that remember and categorize the most negative type of experiences. But many people, the majority of people that have had these types of abduction type of experiences started off having a physical inspection, okay, with the short grays. They were paralyzed, okay? Later on, all of a sudden, they're having these positive experiences with the short grays, okay? Later on, they're being taught by the short grays. Later on, they're interacting with human-looking beings, okay? And they're given spiritual lessons. They're being brought to matrix realities, okay? They're having healings, et cetera, et cetera. But that comes later on, okay? So what we discovered was that this chart says that the more experiences you have, for example, look at the top, more than 20 times. Those are the people that view these experiences as positive, as highly positive, okay? Changing their life in a positive way. So this shows that the more experiences you have, the more positivity you have in your outcome. So in summary, only 1/3 of the people have had an abduction. Out of those people that have had an abduction, 71% now call themselves contactees and not abductees. 9% stated, actually it should have been 8%, stated that it was and it was an abduction of the most negative kind. And out of those, 9% said, yes, it was an abduction, but I was treated with permission. I was treated in a more humane way, okay? So again, this runs counter what's being circulated in the field of ufology. And again, this is, huge numbers from all over the world. Now, the other contact in a matrix reality, let me go over this fairly quickly. That involves obviously a manipulation of space-time. If you get brought to another reality and it's your consciousness and you're interacting with some type of energy being or a human-looking being in this other reality, like in Jodie Foster's movie, Contact. I don't know how many of you have seen that movie, but it's, that's an example of this. That involves a manipulation of space-time. Now, there were 749 people that were brought to a matrix reality, okay? And as I said before, that happened to me while I was driving my car. Let's just go over the yes responses, okay? Were you physically present in your body? Where 61% said yes. Was your consciousness separated from their body? 67%. Now, the reason for that contradiction is that your consciousness is outside of your body, but you in your mind think that you have a body, okay? Were your thoughts sped up? 57%. Were your senses more vivid than usual? Almost 76%. Did you have a feeling of peace and pleasantness? 73%. Did you feel surrounded by a brilliant light? 72%. Did you encounter a mystical being, a presence, or hear a voice? 79%. Did you see deceased or religious spirits? 37%. Did scenes from the past come back from you? 26%. Did you seem to encounter some other unearthly world? 70%. Did time seem to speed up or slow down? 76%. I could go on and on and on, okay? Did scenes from the future come to you? 41%. Scenes from the past? 31%. Did this experience seem very real to you? 83%. Did you perceive that time did not exist? 71%. Okay, now let's look at the spirituality related type of questions. Okay, 97% believe that non-human intelligence can travel to other dimensions. 91% believe that there is some sort of a grand plan in motion and that we're all part of it. 89% believe that there is a connection between non-human intelligence, these beings, and the paranormal. So it's like 90% believe that there's a connection between ETs and the paranormal. 83% believe that there's a connection between this non-human intelligence and the spirit world. So here you have 83% of the thousands of people that took our survey believe that there's a connection between these beings that are interacting with them and the afterlife. 82% believe that non-human intelligence can travel to both the past and the future. 75% believe that there is a connection between non-human intelligence and reincarnation. 45% have reached an agreement with this intelligence. 38% believe that they are modern angels. 30% believe that they were taken aboard a UFO craft. 31% were given a message about God. 30% that they were told by non-human intelligence about the death process, about the spirit world. Okay, so that's me. That was one of my categories, because I was told that information about their connection. So again, almost 1 out of every 3 people that has seen a UFO and has had contact with non-human intelligence believe that they're somehow related to the death process, to the spirit world. Okay, let me skip over these additional things. Now, let me play Dr. Jacques Vallee. Dr. Jacques Vallee has been studying UFOs for over 45 years. Okay, everyone here should know who Dr. Jacques Vallee is. Okay, and he has a totally radically different opinion than materialist mainstream ufology. He's personally has told me that, you know, he will not try not to step inside a ufology conference. That's how much how should I say apprehension he has towards the materialist ufology people. His head, his mind, his perspectives are light years apart from mainstream materialist ufology. Okay, and so here's an excerpt from Dr. Jacques Vallee talking about UFO intelligence and space-time.
I think that from my own point of view, I'm going to be very disappointed if UFOs turn out to be nothing more than visitors from another planet, because I think they could be something much more interesting.
Something from another dimension, a space or time?
I think what the UFO phenomenon is teaching us is that we don't understand time and space. Mm-hmm. Here are objects, I think we have to call them objects, that are physical, that interact with the environment, that cause effects on the witnesses, on the psychology and the physiology of the witnesses, and leave traces on the ground, and yet are capable of, appear to be capable of manipulating time and space in ways that go beyond what our physics understands today.
Okay, so what Dr. Vallee was telling us was what George Knapp had told us earlier, that he doesn't believe that these are material UFOs, that they do appear materially, but he believes it's much more complex than that, that it involves a manipulation of space-time, okay, which is a multi-dimensional aspect. Now, this is what Jacques Vallee wrote about this book titled The Simulation Hypotheses, okay, by a man who graduated from MIT. And so Dr. Vallee wrote, the simulation hypothesis presents a radical alternative to current models of reality. Many fields rejected or neglected by modern science, such as religious visions, near-death experiences, psychic phenomena, and even UFOs, can be brought under this framework. The result is a stunning reappraisal of what it means to be human in an infinite universe. Okay, so this is Dr. Jacques Vallee. And I would say maybe half of the members of our organization hypothesize that we live in a simulated reality. Okay. Now this is Dr. John Mack from his 1999 book titled Passport to the Cosmos, Human Transformation and Alien Encounters. Okay. Dr. John Mack wrote, people know their experiences and what they have undergone does not fit with the prevailing mechanistic worldview. Large percentages of people seem to know there is an unseen world or hidden dimensions of reality. Now, again, this is coming from a professor at the Harvard Medical School, a professor of psychiatry, and one of the early pioneers that researched the UFO contact phenomena. In that book, Passport to the Cosmos, he basically says that these experiences are not just materialistic. They're much, much more complex, just like Dr. Vallee, and involves hidden dimensions of reality, just like Dr. Vallee, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, and every member of our organization. Now, this is Dr. Jeffrey Long. Dr. Jeffrey Long is one of the world's leading researchers, academic researchers on near-death experiences. And he has a statistical database of over 14,000 individuals that had near-death experiences. And he also shares the same view. He's one of the co-chairs of the CCRI Research Committee. Okay, he's a medical doctor and oncologist. And he shares that the vision, that the hypothesis that consciousness is primary, that we live in a multi-dimensional reality, and that we are human beings are interacting with non-human intelligence in a multi-dimensional reality via manipulation of space-time. So Dr. Jeffrey Long, co-chair of the CCRI Research Committee.
From every shred of my research and thousands of experiences that I've reviewed, I'm getting, if you will, a picture of what it's all about. We seem to exist as conscious beings before we came to our earthly life. We're here in our earthly life. The purpose seems to be to have lessons, to have experiences that are unique to what is required to us to be physical beings. At the end of our earthly life, we will return to that one, that all, God, or if you will, that collective consciousness that exists in the afterlife. And that seems to be, all of this points to us being eternal beings. We are literally spiritual beings having an earthly experience.
We are spiritual beings having an earthly experience, okay? As you can see, this is not just about near-death experiences. Our UFO data says the same thing. Okay, the research data from 4,250 individuals from over 100 countries reveals the same thing. Okay, if anyone is interested in acquiring our book, as I said before, you can send me an email at info@experiencer.org, and I'll send you various chapters, including our 120-page chapter 1 and various other chapters from our book. But if you want to purchase our book directly, it's at Amazon. And this is the title of our book, Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. And these are just some of the similarities. There are literally more than 100 similarities between near-death experiences and the UAP contact phenomena. Same thing with out-of-body experiences, but a couple of them. Telepathic communications takes place in one's native language. No matter you speak Spanish, German, Swahili, English, whatever. Both experiences involve out-of-body experiences. Both experiences involve energy beings and spirit beings. They involve medical healings, the topic of reincarnation, visions of the future, which is the ecological disasters that are going to take place with planet Earth. As you saw that they were literally very large percentages of UFO contactees that were given this vision about that we're destroying our planet, okay? Visions of the past, which is a life review. Many of the people that are having near-death experiences are given a life review. And many people that have had UFO contact experiences are also given a life review by these ETs, non-human intelligence, as well. Also, both involve a total personality profile transformation for the positive, as I previously discussed. Both of them involve being taken to a matrix reality. When both groups get returned after their close contact with non-human intelligence, individuals have been documented to have enhanced precognition skills, okay? Both groups are having paranormal experiences. Both groups later see ghosts and spirits, okay? Manipulation of electronic devices. Dr. Bruce Grayson, a professor of psychiatry at the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia, he had part of a major lecture that he gave was about how when near-death experiencers return from their NDE, all of a sudden electronic devices, okay, were malfunctioning. Well, where have you heard that before? Okay, with ET contact experiences, the same exact thing. Both groups involve receiving spiritual messages, as I shown in my research study. Both groups involve the hypotheses that consciousness is non-local, that there is a manipulation of space-time, and that we're dealing with a multi-dimensional reality, okay? So these are just an example of some of the parallels, both of this. And again, this is not mainstream materialist ufology. We're not talking about Rodwell for the 5,000th time, Rendlesham Forest for the 5,000th time. We're not talking about these men walking around in these black suits, whatever they call, and all these things that are circulating in ufology. No, we're focusing on the data that was scientifically, academically corrected from over 4,000 UFO contact experiencers from over 100 countries all around the world. Okay. Now, our new book is titled A Greater Reality, The New Paradigm of Consciousness, the Paranormal, and the Contact Modalities. It should be published in October of this year. Okay, it's going to have 3 volumes, 800 pages approximately for each book. It's going to have 45 authors. Approximately now, roughly half of them will be written by a PhD academics and medical doctors, and the other half will be written by experiencers of the contact modalities. So this is not just someone that has had a UFO, seen a UFO, and has been brought to a UFO ship. No, this is someone that has seen UFOs, that has had near-death experiences, has had out-of-body experiences, has seen ghosts and spirits, you know, the whole paranormal aspects of it. You're going to be getting half the people in our book talking about their multi-experiences and how they're all interrelated, how it's all interrelated. So the focus of our book is introduce to the readers the relationship between consciousness, our cosmology, and contact with non-human intelligence via the contact modalities. So that's the copy of our book there on the right, A Greater Reality. The title is A Greater Reality, The New Paradigm of Consciousness, the Paranormal, and the Contact Modalities. Okay, so again, if anyone wants to contact me, go to info@experiencer.org. And our website for this new organization is under development. So now I can take questions.
Yes. Hi, Ray.
Hello.
I'm from California originally, so it's good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So let me I'm trying to read this question. Just it says, has Free come across any case where 2 or more of the modalities have crossed one another? For example, seeing or meeting the same beings in a DMT experience or in a CE3 experience?
Oh, okay. Yes, okay. Let me address that question. Yes, there are many examples. Let me give you the one that he's referring to, DMT, okay? There's this one experiencer that was having contact experiences with the tall insect type of beings, commonly called mantid beings, okay? And these are commonly described as 7 to 8 feet tall, with a body like an insect and like a grasshopper head, like a praying mantis. These were very frightful experiences for him. Not that this being did anything bad to him, but because it would appear like all of a sudden, like close to him, very in front of him, and it would not communicate with him. And many times it would be like doing something else, like walking around and looking at him, and then all of a sudden it would disappear. So these are very physical type of experiences with him. So he tried DMT, and all of a sudden this being appeared to him in the DMT experience, and one of them was with ayahuasca, which lasts a very long time in your system, not the DMT, but the actual ayahuasca. And so he had a series of experiences with this mantid being, basically teaching him and lecturing him of how he could get his life straightened out, how he could change, and how specifically he could change. And then talked about spirituality, that he needed to become more spiritual, much more loving. It just went on and on and on. So yes, that's a very common experience. And then in terms of people with 2 or more, our book is going to be having experiences of people that are having contact experiences via many diverse ways. For example, the lead article is going to be by this medical doctor who's now in an emergency room fighting the coronavirus. Very, very brilliant lady. She has seen 12 UFOs, okay? 4 or 5 of them were with her husband, okay, that's seen them. A couple of times, these were with large UFOs, triangle shape that went right above them twice. And so, but she's had 2 near-death experiences. She's had 2 out-of-body experiences. She's had 3 Sasquatch experiences. 2 of them were up-close experiences, and tons of paranormal experiences. So she's an example of how all of these experiences are interrelated. And she's going to be the first chapter in our book, but we're having many, many other chapters written by experiencers that are having many of these contact modalities. So I believe I answered that question.
Great. And what about, I had a question. In the media, it seems that, well, for example, the whole recent naval admission that those 3 videos released in the New York Times article from December 16, 2017, that the Navy finally admitted, yes, they were ours, we filmed them, and that's it. You know, they didn't say more. But it seemed, that message seemed to have been sort of completely ignored by the world. You know, do you know what I'm referring to?
Yes, I know what you're referring to, but...
Any comments about that?
Well, to me, it's like whoopee-doo, okay? For the rest of humanity, it's a big thing. But people that have been researching this phenomenon, or people that have had contact experiences, like, duh, you know, what's the big deal? We know that they're here, okay? We know that they're interacting with us. Let's take it to the next step, okay? But yet materialist mainstream ufology, they focus on videos, they focus on photos, and they make these things the main topic of discussion, okay? But to me, it's what have we learned from that, okay? For the rest of humanity that doesn't know about these things, it's a big deal. And that's important for those people, okay? But to me, that's had numerous of these contact experiences and people that have been researching this phenomenon, it's like, okay, you know, so what? I mean, it's so what in terms of being able to learn from this, you know? That's not going to teach you about what this phenomenon is or exploring the phenomenon. It's the experiencer, these people that are having these up-close contact experiences. Those are ones that have the key that unlocks the door to a better understanding of this phenomenon. When you compare our research data with what has been circulating in materialist mainstream ufology for the last 80 years, okay? Compare what we've learned about the phenomenon from our data versus what ufology has given us for 80 years. It's like night and day, okay? On one side, you've got very little or almost nothing. Now, 80 years later, we learned, okay, the UFOs exist, okay? What is that going to teach you about this phenomenon? What have we learned from this phenomenon, okay? And then the data is, that release is being couched via this organization that the name of the actual organization had threat in it, okay? UFO threat, okay? So it's being couched as a possible threatening, you know, alien invasion type of thing, okay? But yet, what does our data show? Does our data show alien invasion or something totally different, okay? So this organization that's releasing this, these are all people that that came from intelligence, military intelligence. Every single one of these people have had connections to military intelligence, okay? And in turn, a lot of these people are living off the military industrial complex, okay? So what better way to be able to continue securing funds from the military industrial complex than presenting this as a possible military threat, and then having, you know, trillions of funding towards all these major military contractors, okay? So the issue of so-called disclosure is being controlled and manipulated by the centralized authority with direct connections to military intelligence, okay? And again, what does that tell humanity? Okay, that UFOs exist. But from my perspective, as a researcher of this phenomenon, together with all of the scientists involved in these research studies, we're like, well, we knew that, you know, 80 years ago, okay? now is what can we learn about this phenomenon?
Thank you, Ray. And there's a couple questions from Astrid. She wants to know, how were these respondents for the survey chosen, first of all? So please answer that.
Okay, they were not chosen. These were open-ended questions, okay, that anyone could have taken the surveys, okay? But we asked there several trick questions that if you answered, yes to a particular question, we know that you were lying or you were misdeceived, okay? Also, to complete our surveys, the first survey was quite short, maybe 2 to 3 hours to complete. The second survey took you multiple hours to complete if it was done properly. And then finally, phase 3 would take you more than a week to write, okay? So the people who took all of our 3 surveys, these are hundreds of hours for you to be able to take these surveys. You got to be very, very dedicated. So, even if you had 5% of the people were people that were trying to mislead us with misinformation, 5%, those are huge numbers, right? But still, it's only 5%. But we had a very large pool. As I said before, we had 4,150 people. So if you took, 5% of that, we're talking a tiny group.
Okay. And Astrid had another question. So how is all this research that you guys have done, how is it received by the media and the academic world? Because, we've noticed that the PhD firepower that you've got behind you in these studies, they're mostly old PhD professors and they're tenured. They're not the young ones, right? So, but
well,
how
what you have, what you have is a lot of the young folks. Just like I know at least 3 medical doctors that are still practicing, that are major experiencers, but they will not come out because they're still practicing physicians, okay? I also know many young university professors, okay, that are very much interested in this, and the majority of them happen to also be experiencers, okay? And, but outside of, let me see, 1, 2, well, someone is in his mid-50s, the other one is in his 60s. So those are the youngest groups, members. But what it is that coming out publicly with these things, it's highly disruptive to your career, because it's first of all, these topics of non-local consciousness, these are not established concepts within academia. The physicists understand all of this, the PhD physicists, okay? And in most major universities, once you're talking about that we live in a multi-dimensional reality, you can't really dismiss these people, because these are most of the PhD physicists around the world. But in terms of the field, the impact that we have had in this field of ufology, I would say minimal impact, because we haven't even been invited to speak at major UFO conferences, okay? For example, the International UFO Conference, which is considered one of the biggest, if not the biggest UFO conference in the world, those people haven't even reached out to me at all.
And why not?
Why? Because we're not talking about mainstream materialist ufology, okay? For those people, ufology is Roswell, Rendlesham Forest, okay? We're talking about, Men in Black type of stuff. We're talking about David Jacobs, that these beings are going to be conquering the world, okay? In terms of what we're doing, academic approach, that's not going to bring in the crowd, okay? It's not going to bring in the masses to their conference. They're, they'd rather have David Jacobs talking about hypnotically regressing 200 people and then saying that the ETs are going to conquer the world. That's who they'd rather have as guest speakers. Or someone from this, from the Elizondo, from this military-industrial complex group, speak about, hey, this new video just came out, they'd rather hear that stuff. But when it comes to academic research on topics involving consciousness, involving spirituality, involving a manipulation of space-time, involving these people having positive experiences via ET contact, it runs totally counter what is being circulated in the field of ufology. And so, for example, there's a couple of very, very big names, people who are not researchers at all, okay? They're saying that what we did was woo-woo science, okay? woo-woo science. Are you a PhD academic that's saying this? No. Have you ever done any statistical research at all whatsoever? No. Okay. But yet they're labeling what we're doing as BS, as woo-woo science. Okay. But you saw the people in our organization. These are all high-level people from physics, from Harvard, from Princeton, from major universities involved in this project. So basically, we've had almost no impact whatsoever, and very few people have invited us to speak at their conferences.
You guys must feel like you're banging your heads against the wall, the proverbial brick wall.
Well, what it is that these concepts are not easy to understand, okay? These concepts involve, as the title of our new book, it involves establishing a new paradigm, of new way of looking at our reality. For example, Jacques Vallee, he on purpose will not attend major UFO conferences. If he does, he talks about some very specific aspect of it, and then he leaves. Okay, he personally has told me he will not associate with ufology folks. Okay, he considers them crackpots. Okay, and I also have the same opinion. I believe that most of the people that are lecturing in the field of ufology are misinformation and disinformation agents. They're not really researchers. And so, and I don't consider the work that we did within the field of ufology. I think that we're trying to be able to understand the underlying phenomena, like Jacques Vallee has stated for over 40 years. He's been trying to understand what is behind all this, and what we're showing in our research data is that pretty much we're totally clueless. All of the academics in our group, our conclusion is that we have no conclusion. Okay, we're just as befuddled as anyone else. And it's just like you ask a quantum physicist, how are you able to explain quantum physics? Okay, the reasons behind it. People don't understand it. You can only document it. You can do experiments on it, okay, on quantum physics. But a consciousness, the double slit experiment. Here, you with your consciousness, whether it changes, from a particle to a wave, is when you're looking at it, at the double slit. Now, are physicists, since it was first discovered in the 1920s, are they able to understand what is going on behind that? Okay, of how your consciousness impacts on a physical phenomenon? They don't. Okay, they don't understand them, so they totally dismiss it. Okay, and now with the field of ufology, I believe that people are coming around to this new way of viewing the UFO phenomena from much more complex phenomena, which Dr. Jacques Vallee and Edgar Mitchell pioneered the way, because Edgar was talking about the same thing as Jacques Vallee, since the early 70s. So both of these two men were geniuses, and Dr. Vallee is still alive, but they're little understood. They don't understand them. Have any members from your group actually read Jacques Vallee, some of the more complex theoretical aspects of Dr. Vallee, of what is underlying this phenomenon? Okay, and let alone the rest of ufology. People don't understand this man, Jacques Vallee, and what he's arguing is, like George Knapp said, that this is way more complex than Roswell, Rendlesham Forest, that these are just physical objects, that we're looking in the sky, that we're dealing with something that involves a manipulation of space-time. And as Dr. Vallee said, we just don't understand space-time. Okay.
I have a question from Zim. He wanted to know regarding, based on your research, the free research, how do you see Dr. Greer's recent documentary about contact, CE5, contact of the fifth kind, human-initiated contact? Any comments about that?
Well, Stephen Greer is not a researcher. He's just an experiencer. That's it. Okay. In terms of him personally, I know hundreds of people that have called down more UFOs than Greer. Okay. And they don't charge $3,500 to go out to the desert to get sandflies. Okay. In terms of Greer's perspective, all of the members in our organization will have nothing to do with Stephen Greer for numerous reasons. We would have to be here half a day to discuss all the reasons. people that they know under the table about Stephen Greer.
Okay. And what you were saying before in the research, that only 5% of the experiencers have had a negative experience with these things when they have more than 20 experiences. You had a major wake up in 2012. You had no interest in this whatsoever before, but afterwards, it's something got supercharged within you. Your curiosity, perhaps, and then psychological expansion. And is this something that could be awaiting humanity in general? Because right now, people don't want to look at it. People have a tendency to have the human ostrich syndrome. They don't want to look at something that will force them to reevaluate every aspect of their existence.
Okay. Well, one part of my lecture was the data of the questions that we asked. How did you change? How were you before, and how were you afterwards? Okay.
Right.
And what you saw was a complete transformation of these individuals. Not all of them, but the vast majority of them. It was between 75 to 85%, depending on the question. Okay. And so, and this not only occurred with UFO abductees, okay, it also occurs with near-death experiences. And what it is that many of these individuals are having all of these paranormal experiences, okay? And many of them include lessons and teachings. Okay, now I didn't talk about my personal experiences here because that's a topic for another day. Okay, but these entities that we're interacting with gave me, let me just give you one example. Okay, they gave me a series of near-death experiences. Okay, here I was, a total atheist. Okay. and they gave me a series of NDE related experiences to give me spirituality. Okay. Let me ask you a question to the members of all the group here. What would be the statistical probabilities of the very first 3 people you ever mentioned near-death experiences to? 3 people. All of them have had a near-death experience. First one was my medical doctor. The second one was the husband of my wife's friend. And then the third was my own father, who I never knew about, okay? It was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 3 days in a row. The very first 3 people I ever mentioned NDEs to, all 3 of them told me about their NDEs, okay? Now, is that a coincidence? No, because whatever these beings were, they were giving me before that experience a series of NDE-related experiences. And me, because I was such a materialist, I was such a rationalist, okay? I was grounded in science, okay, beforehand, materialist science. They had to give me all these things to show me these things of the spirituality aspects of it, okay? Another thing is how the Free Foundation was started, okay? If you ever do bring Mary Rodwell back to be interviewed, either personally in Denmark or on your radio show, ask her this question. Could you very briefly tell us about how Free got started in 2 days? How Ray Hernandez was put in contact with Mary Rodwell, Rudy Shields, and Edgar Mitchell in 48 hours. After I had that out-of-body experience where I was brought to that matrix reality. Remember I told you about that? Okay,
yes.
Okay. Immediately that afternoon, that night, when I got home from work, I got an email from Mary Rodwell. It says, "Dear Ray, I'm sorry, I'm responding to an email that you had sent me 6 months ago, but it just popped on my computer today." The same day I had that experience. It was held up in cyberspace for 6 months. And then that night, Mary and I had a very lengthy conversation about my experiences. The very next day at 9:30 in the morning, I got a phone call. "Hello, is this Ray Hernandez?" "Yes, who's this?" "Dr. Rudy Shields." Okay, Dr. Rudy Shields from Harvard University gave me a call at 9:30 in the morning. Okay, then we spoke for almost 2 hours. And Mary was the one that gave him my information. And then Rudy gave me the telephone number for Edgar Mitchell. And he said that what I experienced in this other reality was Dr. Edgar Mitchell's quantum hologram theory of consciousness, which Rudy had just finished writing a paper titled The Modern Miracles and Consciousness, which is all about the contact modalities, which is the same thing that I had experienced in that teaching experience. So then that afternoon I called Edgar. He invited me to his home. the very next day. So within 48 hours, I was at Edgar Mitchell's home, and he was the one that coordinated basically the establishment of free. So you could ask that. Edgar Mitchell's deceased now, but you could ask that to Mary. And if you ever do interview Dr. Rudy Shield, ask him that question as well. And they will tell you exactly what I just told you. Now, what I'm getting at is, was all of this a coincidence? That I had that out-of-body experience, and then they put me in, whatever this intelligence is, put me in contact with Mary Rodwell, Rudy Shields, and Edgar Mitchell within 48 hours? Was that a coincidence? No, I don't think so. Okay, this was orchestrated. And if I would tell you some more of my experiences, you would say that yes, these things are orchestrated. And many of these experiencers, if you ask them to give me an illustration of how non-human intelligence orchestrated something for you, they would write down all the details. Okay, so we're not just dealing with some little short gray that comes from Mars or Venus or some other planet. Okay, we're dealing with something that's able to manipulate space-time, someone that's able to manipulate the past and the future. Okay, extremely complicated, and we just don't understand these things.
Right. Well, it takes a lot of courage to say I don't know. You know. So
no, everyone in our group, we don't know. But if you go to a UFO conference, at least half of those lectures will say, I know. Okay, right. Including Stephen Greer. I know, I have the answers. Everyone else, they don't have the answers, but I have the answers. Okay, yeah. So whenever, yes. anytime anyone comes to you, like they've got the answers, run away from that person. Run away. First of all, the ego. Okay, the ego is destructive. Okay, and Stephen Greer has one of the major egos in this whole field. Okay, secondly, nobody knows squat about this. Even Jacques Vallee said numerous of his lectures and discussions over the years. He says we're totally clueless. We have no idea. We have some type of an experience that's both physical and non-physical, paranormal. Okay, is both within our reality. And we know it manipulates space-time. Alan Hynek came to that same conclusion toward the latter years of his life. Okay? Why? Because I was very good friends with a man who's a dear friend. They had summer vacations together with Alan Hynek and another PhD physicist named Willie Smith. His name is Dr. Virgilio Sanchez Osejo. Okay, and he lived right here in Miami. So he told me tons of experiences with Alan Hynek. And he told me it was only till his later years that he came around to see this, like Jacques Vallee, you know, much more complicated perspective. So, but you know, materialist mainstream ufology is still like this, as Dr. John Alexander says, in a stovepipe fashion. It's just about UFOs, just about UFOs. Okay, Rendlesham Forest. Okay,
right.
Roswell. The picture, the Tic Tac picture. You know, that's their perspective. And
right.
The perspective of members of our organization is that this is way more complicated than just a little video.
Much broader.
Yes.
There's a question from Carson. He was wondering, with your research from all over the world, you said over 100 countries, were there any major cultural differences in the responses in some areas? Something that really caught your attention?
Yeah, that's a very important question. Okay. Let me give you two responses for that. The first response is we had a PhD statistician as part of our group, and he's also with the new organization, CCRI. So this is a man that makes a living doing statistics, a PhD statistician. His name is Dr. Russell Scalpone. And what he did is he grouped all of the responses into 5 geographic areas. He put all the people from the United States as one group, all the people from Canada as one group, all the people from the United Kingdom as one group, all the people from mainland Europe as one group, and then he combined Australia and New Zealand as a separate 5th group. Okay. Then he looked at how each of these groups answered all of the questions. Okay. What he discovered and what he showed us with our data was there was less than a 10% statistical variability in how people responded to the questions. Okay. So a very tiny difference, no matter what geographic area you're from. Okay. That was for the English language survey. So that means people were answering the same way, no matter what was your geographic location? Okay. Now, when we compared our data with the Spanish language data, okay, we found out that these experiences are even much more positive, okay, perceived as positive than the English language data, okay. Now, what we suspect, we have several Latin Americans as part of our research group. We have several major Latin American researchers that were involved with the Spanish surveys. And what we suspect is that in Latin America, they didn't read about Bud Hopkins. They didn't read about David Jacobs, that the aliens are taking over the world, okay? and also the type of being that we're seeing in Latin America was much, much more human-looking being and much more the energy being, okay? In terms of the being that people are seeing. In terms of negative experiences, very, very few. There are people that are frightened when they see these different types of beings. Yes, they put down frightened. But overall, you know, the negativity aspect was tiny, okay? So within those two language groups, there was a difference. So yes, in terms of geographically all around, there was very little difference. And in terms of the languages, there was a major difference between the Spanish survey and the English survey, because the Spanish survey was even much more positive. The English survey was very positive, but with the Spanish survey, almost all positive experiences.
It'll be interesting when you get some Asian languages and cultures also in those surveys.
Yeah, I mean, we really haven't gotten any money.
Yeah.
All of our funding has been self-funded. Someone would kick in $300, someone else would kick another, you know, $500. I've spent, you know, several $1,000s of my own money over the years on these projects. Little by little, that's how we got our donations, okay? And so, you know, also what we were doing, the major cost was SurveyMonkey. We had a SurveyMonkey for the different languages, and that cost like $330 a year, $340. And so that was in 5 languages. It was almost $1,500 a year. And then we had a website. We had to pay somebody to build a website. But in terms of publicity, there was outside of Ray Hernandez and Kathy Martin and Mary Rodwell and a few others, you know, that's been minimal publicity. But yet, look at our research study. Okay, it doesn't exist anywhere else. No one knows about it. And yet we're being attacked as woo-woo science by these people who have no conceptions of what PhD physicists are talking about, which is a multidimensional reality, okay? The paranormal, they totally dismiss the paranormal, but yet you talk to most major content experiencers, they'll talk about paranormal experiences, okay? So they're not even going about to abide by what experiencers are having. You just say, oh, paranormal goes spirit. No, that doesn't exist. You know, unless I could physically see it, physically touch it, if I could put it in a test tube and experiment on it, it doesn't exist, you know. So these people are totally clueless.
Right. And there's another question from Zim. It's more of a personal question. How did your private life change after 2012, after your experiences, like, for example, your relations with friends and acquaintances, after you sort of came out of the closet, so to speak, he asked?
Yeah, it's in the beginning, I was very, very quiet. I would say maybe the first year, certainly the first 9 months, I was very quiet about these experiences. I was very selective who I told this to. But once I did begin to talk about these things, people then began to tell me about their own paranormal experiences. For example, at my wife's church, there were 9 people that had near-death experiences, okay? Remember I told you that I was forced to go to the Thursday group prayer meetings?
Yes.
Well, I found out that the man who led that, okay, all those years, the man had a near-death experience. He was on a ladder on the 2nd floor, pressure washing his roof, and he fell down, and all of a sudden he rose out of his body. So his body underneath, all the people around him, and the ambulance eventually came and all that. And then he had a typical near-death experience, and he told various members of our church. And I asked him about it, and he repeated it, okay? But he went to the Monsignor, okay, at the church. And the Monsignor said, shh, Don't repeat that to anyone. The church doesn't believe that. So don't repeat it. So he kept quiet, okay? And then also there was a man that was a deacon at our church, a deacon, okay? For anyone that's familiar with the Catholic Church, a deacon is people that you can marry, but you're like right underneath the priest, okay? You've taken all these courses, all these classes, all these rituals you've passed, okay? And it's a very powerful influence within the Catholic Church, the deacon, okay? You dress up almost like a monk, all in white with the robes and everything, you know? And so anyway, there's this man who was a deacon at our church and had a daughter the same age as my daughter. This is about maybe 4 years ago. And so the wife goes to me, Ray, you haven't been in church lately. And then my wife goes, it's because he's an atheist, you know. That was before my paranormal experiences relating to NDEs. That was maybe 5 years ago. Yeah, about 5 years ago. Oh, that's because he's an atheist. And I said, Dulce, you know I'm not an atheist, you know. And you really want me to tell them what happened to us? She goes, go ahead. So then I told her about what happened in our living room, what the energy being, my wife disappeared in front of me, her calling down UFOs, and these huge UFOs would appear. You know, this is at least 4 times, her seeing the tall human-looking beings dressed in white monks robes and all the paranormal experiences, and then what happened to me. So then after I finished, the wife, the deacon's wife, goes to me, he goes out of his body. He goes out of his body. He goes out of his body. And I'm like, what? You know? And I said, you're having out-of-body experiences? Now, this conversation was all in Spanish, okay, because they're originally from Venezuela. So we were having this in Spanish. So I told them in Spanish, I said, usted está viajando afuera de su cuerpo. Are you leaving, your consciousness leaving your body? And then he was like, with like a state of depression, he looks down, you know, he goes, like, like, yes, you know. I said, and then we got into the details. And I said, you know, is it mainly in the house, around the neighborhood, or do you travel far away from this? He says, no, I'm too scared to go far away. I just travel at most in the neighborhood. That's it, you know. But I'm too scared to go far away. And I said, well, that's very, very common. It's very, very typical of people when they're having out-of-body experiences to be, you know, stay in their house or to go in the surrounding areas. And I explained to him a little bit more about the phenomenon, et cetera, you know. And so, and then also tons of people that have told me about the UFO experiences, tons of people. There was a husband and wife team. They've had like 3 or 4 major experiences, okay? These are, you know, avid churchgoers, you know. Another very dear friend of mine saw a huge, gigantic orb that was sitting right at the telephone line, that all the traffic stopped in this commercial strip, okay? All the cars were just stopped looking at that orb. He said it was like, Ray, it was like the moon, he said. It was like the moon, except it was right next to a telephone wire, you know? And then tons of other experiences. So I would say maybe 1 out of every 3 people has told me about a paranormal experience, okay? Many of them involve UFOs, out-of-body experiences, ghosts and spirits. You know, tons of people have seen ghosts and spirits. So to me, it was a blessing because now I talk about openly to these things. And lo and behold, if you press somebody and you ask them the right way, they will tell you about their paranormal experience.
Okay. And there's a question from Stig. He was wondering, what part does reincarnation play in your studies?
Well, we asked several questions about reincarnation. It was like maybe 5 or 6 different questions. And then even in the open-ended questions, we asked questions about the spirit world, about the afterlife, and reincarnation was one of those sub-questions. If I remember the statistic correctly, I don't recall exactly, but it was anywhere from between 25 to 33% of people were actually told by these beings about reincarnation, okay? And then the people that believe, we asked separate questions. One was, what do you believe? And then a whole series of questions was, what were you told, okay? To make it separate, okay? And it was, I think, more than 85% or 90% believe that reincarnation is integrated with the ET contact phenomenon. And people were told, for example, let me give you a couple of examples, okay? One is a medical doctor who's had unbelievable experiences. This man was skipped 5 grades, okay? He started medical school at the age of 17, medical school in the US, okay? A genius, extremely bright man, okay? He has had both UFO contact experiences. He's had medical healings by short grays. He's had tons of out-of-body experiences, okay? And one of the topics that he talked about is reincarnation, that he was shown all his previous reincarnations, okay? In great detail. He was actually brought back like he was like a consciousness reviewing an experience. And he was told that, you know, you were here, you saw this, you saw that, you were, you know. And then there was another man who is a retired federal DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration agent, okay? He was one of the people that brought down Manuel Noriega, the dictator in Panama, for smuggling cocaine. You know, a person with a lot of authority. His wife is a PhD psychologist. His daughter is a PhD psychologist. And he and his wife and his daughter, all of them have had major experiences, but he and his wife have had tons of experiences, confirmed by both, because they're very good friends of mine. And so he has told me that he's been brought to these other realities and shown his past lives, okay? And this is not through dreams, okay? He's sitting on his couch. Let me just give you an example. And this is extremely common, what I'm about to tell you. He's sitting on his couch, he's watching TV, and all of a sudden, he tells me, Ray, I saw Zeus. I said, what do you mean Zeus? You know, the Greek god, you know, from Olympus and all that stuff. I said, what do you mean Zeus? How do you know it was Zeus? Well, he didn't tell me it was Zeus, but he was like 7 feet tall, very muscular. He had a long beard and dressed in a white monk's robe. So I thought he was Zeus, you know? And so this being, you know, right when he was watching TV, he says, look, Alberto, I know that you've been thinking about death lately. Alberto is about 75 years old or 76. And so he says, let me show you what death is like, okay? And then he gave him a near-death experience, okay? Him going through the tunnel, the whole works. And then after that experience finished, and on the way back, he said, but Alberto, when it happens to you for real, when you die, you got to go through the light. You can't stay back, okay? If you stay back, then your spirit will be lingering in this 3D material reality, you know, like a ghost or a spirit. He says you got to go through the light, okay? He's also had very, very similar experiences by human-looking beings that are dressed in white monk's robes that have physically appeared to him. Because he says he doesn't dream. He doesn't remember any dreams. Everything is all physical to him. And one of them brought him 2 different experiences about reincarnation. He was brought to a past life, okay? And all of a sudden, boom, he's back in his couch, you know? And he was like, you know, what the hell was that, you know? And so, again, his wife has corroborated many, many of these experiences with Alberto. She's told me, for example, of apports, things that just materialize. They have a whole cabinet, huge 8-foot-tall cabinet filled with apports, things that just materialized. Very, very different things that materialized. The wife has told me that for many, many years, he would be like humming like this, his whole body going like this, and he'd be like a couple of inches off the bed. And she would like put her hand underneath, and he was like floating a couple of inches off the bed, and he'd be like humming like this, you know? And so this is a woman, she's a PhD psychologist. She has her own practice, okay? She's still practicing, even though she's like 73 or 74. A very respectable woman. And the daughter too, you know, who's also a PhD psychologist, has told me many of the experiences that they had in their house. So anyway, those are just 2 examples of the topic of reincarnation. So we got that data from both the survey, and there's a lot of people that I've spoken with that have told me many of their reincarnation type of experiences. So it's very, very real. Now, do we understand it? No. Okay, we could only come up with hypotheses of what might be taking place. But at this point, these are just wild guesses.
Right. We're going to be wrapping up soon, and I have just got one last question, Ray.
Yes.
You know, it seems like you had a huge opening experience in 2012, and we've come across many people who've had positive experiences, just like your research is pointing towards, is suggesting, is showing actually. And it sort of like increases people's level of consciousness. It increases like sort of people start waking up more and more in terms of the bigger picture with 7.5 billion people on the planet, you know, more and more UFO encounters, or maybe more are going to be videoed, shot, photographed with cameras on phones. What do you see in terms of the bigger picture for humanity with these encounters?
Okay. What most of the members of our organization, both the academics, the medical doctors, and the lay researchers, people like, you know, Mary Rodwell, Kathleen Martin, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, Denise Stoner, and even Whitley Strieber. I've had numerous conversations with him, and Jacques Vallee. What we all believe, and Edgar Mitchell and Rudy Shields, etc. What we, all of us, hypothesize is taking place is that on a one-on-one basis, there are awakening individuals to the true nature of our multidimensional reality. Okay, that we're not just physical beings living a physical experience, that we are actually eternal beings living a multidimensional experience. And we're just in the infant stages of beginning to understand this. Okay, so what they're doing is they're waking up people, and individuals initially in this waking up process is highly traumatic. Okay, because I didn't give you many of the details of my experiences, but there was a point where I was having many paranormal related type of experiences, which incidentally, one of them related to reincarnation, one of them related to missions, you know, mission here. And so it got to a point where I started to drink, and I would get drunk for 5 straight days, okay? Because I couldn't deal with that. I could deal with seeing a huge, gigantic UFO. I could deal with having an energy being in my living room, and my wife having, you know, these experiences, and my daughter having some of these, not a lot, right? I could deal with all that stuff. But once you're dealing with multidimensional things, you're dealing with reincarnation, you're dealing with missions, you know, past lives. That's some freaky stuff, okay? And I couldn't handle it. And so after the 5th day, whatever this intelligence that's interacting with me, they sent me another experiencer basically to wake me up. That's a very detailed story, but it's like, because I was always fighting these things, you know. I was still wanted to be grounded, you know, and I was refusing to accept a lot of things. So what they did with me was all these experiences. So like now I don't question it anymore, you know. I would have to spend with you and your group a whole day telling you about all my experiences and how it led me to fully awaken to this reality that I finally now accept it, okay? So what it's doing, it's awakening people one-on-one. And the question I always ask is, why don't they do it to everybody else? Okay, because if they would do it to everybody else, we would have a totally different planet. You saw the statistics of how people changed. Okay.
Yes.
And it's not only our data; it was the data that Dr. Kenneth Ring did back in 1986. He only had 85 people for each group, so it was 170 people altogether. And he showed that both groups, both the NDE group and the abductee group, changed exactly the same way. So we duplicated that study, but now with thousands of people. So to me, it's like, why doesn't this intelligence do this to the rest of humanity? And what I think what it is just the ontological shock of it, that we're not ready for it. And also we have our infrastructure is controlled by a very small wealthy elite. Okay, it's the 1% of 1% that controls this world. Okay, and then you could have the military industrial complex. All of a sudden, they could have a coup d'etat, you know, all over the world in these numerous countries, including the U.S., and say, look, we're being invaded by all these aliens, you know. We need to be able to have martial law, and you'll have Donald Trump becoming a dictator, you know, for the next 20 years or so, you know. So we don't know the predictions of what might take place. You know, I think it'll be major shock towards how humanity is run, quote unquote, by the power elites. So again, that's just my own speculation, my own hypothesis. But in many ways, I always say to myself, why don't they do this to everybody? Because if they do it, what happened to me and everybody else that took our survey, you'll see a tremendous transformation for the positive. So I think the big picture is that they're slowly awakening humanity. And I think over time, they're going to be doing it in drips, because time for us might be very different from time for them.
Yes. Thank you, Ray. That was really lovely. And thank you very much. And from Astrid, one of our members, she says, thank you so much. It's been so uplifting, the whole lecture, the research study. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Astrid. And we're going to be continuing with this research with this new organization. And instead of just UFOs, we're going to be focusing on the big picture, all of the contact modalities. And so you might see me a lot older with a lot more white hair 5 years from now, but nobody else is doing it. And we're doing it with zero funding, so it's going to take a long time. And plus, most of these people are in their late 70s and 80s. So who knows how many of them are going to be around 5 years from now. So thank you very much. And I think it's important work that we're doing, but yet no one is taking us seriously. No one cares about what we're doing.
Well, hopefully more and more people will.
Thank you. Thank you.
Part of the mass awakening.
Thank you to UFO Denmark and to all the members. And again, if anyone has any questions, I could follow up with my email. I gave my email to everyone earlier. And I want to thank you for this invitation.
Thank you so much, Ray. That was wonderful. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.